So the general idea of this study is we looked into the video game League of Legends and surveyed the player base. We wanted to determine the most annoying mechanics and the most fun mechanics from a player's perspective, and try to identify potential biases and potentially help the developers and designers of the game to create more enjoyable gameplay. So to get most data, I first of all did a survey of the community. I found a bunch of Reddit and Discord servers to put this survey on. I also used data from OPGG, which is a website dedicated to giving stats of characters from the game, such as win rate and their most popular positions. And class and release date are pulled from the game itself, and also you can view them on stuff like the wiki. There's also a bunch of booleans. These are all mostly made by me manually. Some of them are objective, for example, if a character has stealth or can deal true damage, but some of them are more subjective, such as high mobility or high range. Generally, I think most people would agree with decisions. There's also stats in the game itself on a 1-3 system, so that generally also kind of help guide the decisions. The only one that's really subjective is unique. Unique is for characters who generally have gimmicks in their playstyle, such as Yuumi or Akshan, and their abilities are generally different from the rest of the cast. So here's the results of the poll. Here are the most hated characters and the least hated characters in the game. The most hated characters being Yuumi and Shaco, while the most liked character is Ezreal. Notably, of the top 28 characters, only 4 appeared on both charts, who are Pyke, K'Sante, Fizz, and Zoe. This shows that generally people will hate a character or favorite a character, but not both. The median hate votes for a character was 0, but the median like votes for a character was 1. So on average, people like a wider variety of characters than the ones they hate. Here's a chart of all of the characters in the game of where they place on the hate versus favorite scale. Generally having 0 of one vote and having 1 or more of the other vote is a common occurrence. Here are people's most hated roles and their most hated positions. These are just the total sum of all votes handed in. So the first stat we looked at is win rate versus hate, win rate versus favorites, and win rate versus play rate. Generally, win rate does not have a huge amount of effect on the amount that people like a character. The hate of a character is not super affected by the play rate, though there is a bit of positive correlation. There is a lot of correlation between people's play rate of a character and their favorite character, which makes sense as people are probably playing their favorite characters more than not. So here's the chart showing the most hated mechanics in League of Legends. Stealth is the highest rated, followed by unique and gimmick, and then immunity characters. Stealth is obvious, as is characters being turned invisible. Unique gimmick is, again, more subjective, but is for characters like Yuumi or Akshan, who have mechanics no other character can do. And immunity is for characters who either have something like a spell shield or complete damage immunity, such as Kayle or Taric. When you look at people's favorite mechanics, it's a lot more even and spread out. Most people are within a little bit of the mean, and this makes sense as League of Legends is a team-based game where you'd want to have multiple people of different roles. Notably, comparing to play rate, it's a very similar chart, meaning people are on average again playing their favorite characters. When looking at people's most hated roles, the role on average that gets the most hate is mid, followed by support, top, jungle, then bot lane. But when people report their favorite role, bot lane is by far the most common, but the distribution of the other 4 columns is relatively similar, barring jungle. This would lead me to believe that quite often people will pick their least favorite character as a character of the same role as their own character, barring bot lane, who tends to not have their hard counters as their lane opponents. When looking at people's most hated and most liked classes, the clear standouts are assassins, skirmishers, and then enchanters and wardens. So the 2 distinct groups you have are people who are high mobility and trying to take out squishy backliners, and then the 2 roles that are based on protecting their allies. For people's most liked classes, we have marksmen near the top, which would make sense with the bot lane, and then burst mages and catchers. These are notably 2 roles that tend to be squishy and easy to kill, and therefore are prime targets for assassins and skirmishers. When comparing the most liked classes to the most played classes, again, you see a very similar distribution, with really burst mages being the only outlier in the 2. Now, there is a big stigma in the community that later characters are more broken or powerful or have too many abilities. When you look at the total amount of votes that each year got, though, you'll see that 2009 is actually the highest amount. However, this is due to 2009 having the most characters released in that year. When looking at the mean hate votes of a character, you'll see that it definitely seems to be that on average, newer characters receive more hate. However, this is also to say that if you were to pick any random person, they would, on average, be more likely to pick a 2009 character than any other year of character. You'll also find that a lot of the mechanics that people hated from before are very much more prevalent on newer characters compared to older characters. For example, stealth was on 100% of characters that were released in 2018, and it is generally a very rare mechanic among very old characters. Unique gimmick characters are also significantly more common in newer days. Immunity is a much older mechanic, but is sometimes on newer characters as well, especially in 2022. High mobility and high poke characters are more even overall, though both tend to have higher spikes in the later years. This is to say that, on average, newer characters have a lot more of these more hated mechanics than older characters tended to have. It is notable, however, that on average, while the same general guideline of people would on average say 2010, 2011 are their favorite characters, but if you look at the average amount of votes that a newer character got, you'll find it's on average higher than older characters. So overall, this data is helpful for the designers of the characters in the game to make, on average, more fun characters. There's also a level of bias that the community should kind of acknowledge. If everyone's playing marksmen and marksmen are super strong and assassins are super weak, then people might start hating marksmen. It's also notable that as League of Legends is such a diverse game, there are a wide variety of players. While marksmen tend to be the most played role, it doesn't even make up 1/10 of the player base. So designing around marksman alienates 90% of the player base. I think there is also a drive that your character should be the strongest as you like them the most and you like winning, but there are notable biases when judging the best and worst from the game.